I thought I had built my life on a foundation of trust. As a successful architect in Boston, I had everything going for me. My career was thriving, and I was about to marry Stephanie, the woman I had loved deeply for 3 years. My younger brother, Jack, had always been my closest confidant since childhood. I never imagined the two people I trusted most would destroy everything I believed in with one unforgivable act. Before I share how my life fell apart and how I rebuilt it stronger than before, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to choose yourself over toxic family. My relationship with Stephanie had been nothing short of perfect. We met at a charity gala in downtown Boston 4 years ago. I was there representing my firm, which had donated a significant amount to the Children's Hospital fundraiser. She was volunteering at the event, her blonde hair catching the light as she laughed with guests. Something about her genuine smile drew me in immediately. I found an excuse to talk to her by the dessert table, pretending to need help deciding between chocolate cake and cheesecake. She recommended both with a playful wink, and we ended up talking until the event staff started cleaning up around us. Our first date was the very next day, a Sunday brunch that stretched into an afternoon walk along the Charles River. What made Stephanie so special was how we connected on multiple levels. We shared a love for classic films, hiking on weekends, and dreaming about traveling the world together. She was a kindergarten teacher who genuinely loved her work, and her patience with children made me excited about our future family. We had already discussed having 2 kids, maybe 3, once we were married and settled. My brother Jack had always been an important part of my life, too. Growing up, I was the protective older brother. When kids bullied him in middle school, I was the one who stepped in. When he struggled with math, I stayed up late helping him study. Our parents worked long hours, so in many ways I became both brother and caretaker. As adults, that protective instinct never faded. When Jack struggled to find steady work after college, I convinced my company to give him a chance in our marketing department. He was living in a small apartment just 15 minutes from mine, and we still got together weekly for beers and basketball games. I trusted him completely. That was my first mistake. The wedding plans were coming together beautifully. We had secured a gorgeous venue overlooking the harbor, planned a 2-week honeymoon in Italy, and sent invitations to 150 guests. Stephanie had found her dream dress, and my tuxedo was tailored to perfection. Everything was falling into place for our June wedding. About 2 months before the big day, I started noticing subtle changes in Stephanie's behavior. She became more distant, often lost in thought during our conversations. Our previously active intimacy had dwindled, with Stephanie claiming exhaustion from wedding planning. Most concerning was how she acted whenever Jack was around during family dinners or when he stopped by our apartment. She would become visibly anxious, avoiding eye contact with him, and finding reasons to leave the room. I chalked it up to pre-wedding nerves at first. Planning a wedding is stressful, and Stephanie was handling most of the details while still teaching full-time. I tried to be understanding, taking on more responsibilities and giving her space when she needed it. Then came the day that shattered everything. I was supposed to be on a 3-day business trip to Chicago presenting designs for a new corporate headquarters. The client unexpectedly postponed our final meeting, so I caught an earlier flight home, thinking I would surprise Stephanie with takeout from her favorite Italian restaurant. When I entered our apartment, I heard Stephanie on the phone in our bedroom, her voice distressed. I paused in the hallway, not wanting to interrupt what sounded like an intense conversation. "You need to tell him, Jack. I cannot keep doing this. The guilt is killing me," she was saying, her voice breaking. "This baby is yours, and Miller deserves to know before the wedding." The world stopped spinning in that moment. The takeout bag slipped from my hand, the sound alerting Stephanie to my presence. When she emerged from the bedroom and saw me standing there, her face drained of color. Neither of us spoke for what felt like an eternity. "How long?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Stephanie broke down in tears, collapsing onto our couch. Between sobs, the truth came out. She and Jack had slept together multiple times over the past 6 months. What started as a drunken mistake after a holiday party had evolved into a full-blown affair. And now the final blow: she was 8 weeks pregnant and the timing confirmed Jack was the father. My entire world collapsed around me. The woman I had planned to spend my life with, and the brother I had always protected, had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. I felt physically sick, rushing to the bathroom as my body rejected the reality I was being forced to accept. I spent the next 3 days in a hotel, unable to return to the apartment I had shared with Stephanie. My phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls from her, Jack, and various family members, but I could not bring myself to speak to any of them. I needed time to process what had happened. Calling off the wedding was a logistical and emotional nightmare. I drafted a brief email to our guests saying only that unforeseen circumstances had forced us to cancel. The speculation and gossip would be inevitable, but I could not bear to share the humiliating truth. Hundreds of congratulatory messages had to be responded to with awkward explanations. Deposits were lost, honeymoon reservations canceled, and dreams shattered. Each task was a fresh reminder of what I had lost. Eventually, I had to face my brother. 1 week after discovering the affair, I agreed to meet Jack at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop downtown. I arrived first ordering black coffee that I had no intention of drinking. When Jack walked in looking sleep-deprived and nervous, I felt nothing but cold rage. He sat down across from me, his eyes red-rimmed. "Miller, I am so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. Never meant for it to happen," I repeated incredulously. "You accidentally slept with my fiancée multiple times. Over 6 months, you accidentally got her pregnant. Explain exactly which part was not intentional, Jack." His excuses were pathetic. He claimed they had both been drunk the first time, said they had tried to stop but developed feelings for each other, suggested that maybe it was fate, that perhaps Stephanie had been meant for him all along. "You were always the successful one, Miller," he said, his voice taking on a defensive tone. "The perfect son, with the perfect job, and the perfect fiancée. Maybe for once something good was supposed to be mine." That comment revealed the resentment that had apparently been simmering beneath our relationship for years. My brother, who I had helped and supported at every turn, saw my happiness as something to be envied and taken. I left without another word, any lingering hope of salvaging our brotherhood completely extinguished. 3 days later, my parents called a family meeting. Despite my reluctance, I agreed to attend, hoping they would finally offer the support I desperately needed. I arrived at their suburban home Sunday afternoon, steeling myself for what I assumed would be a discussion about how to move forward as a family after such a profound betrayal. My parents, Robert and Linda, sat stiffly in their living room. My sister Amy was there too, perched uncomfortably on an armchair. Jack arrived last, slinking in like a scolded dog, but taking a seat confidently next to our parents. The stage was set for what would become the second betrayal. "Miller," my father began, clearing his throat awkwardly, "we know you are going through a difficult time. What Jack and Stephanie did was wrong. Absolutely wrong." I nodded, waiting for the support I craved. But he continued, and that single word made my stomach drop. "We need to consider the bigger picture here. A child is involved now. Your niece or nephew." My mother reached over to pat my hand. "Sometimes in life, we need to be the bigger person. Family is everything, Miller. Surely you can find a way to forgive them eventually." I stared at them in disbelief. "Are you seriously asking me to forgive my brother for sleeping with my fiancée?" "Not right away," my father clarified, as if that made it better. "But down the road, for the sake of the child, for the sake of family harmony." What came next was even more shocking. My mother, with a tentative smile, suggested that perhaps I should consider taking Stephanie back. "The child will need a father, and you two were so good together. Maybe with time and counseling you could even raise the baby as your own." The suggestion was so absurd, so utterly devoid of regard for my feelings, that I actually laughed. This clearly was not the reaction they expected. "You cannot be serious," I said, looking from one parent to the other. "You expect me to take back a woman who cheated on me with my own brother, to raise their child as my own? What kind of doormat do you think I am?" "It is not about being a doormat," Amy interjected. "It is about keeping the family together." Jack made a terrible mistake. But he is still your brother. And what about my dignity, my self-respect? Does that mean nothing to any of you? The conversation devolved from there. It became clear that, in their minds, family unity trumped individual well-being. They were more concerned about avoiding scandal and maintaining appearances than about the psychological damage their suggestion would cause me. When my father implied that my unwillingness to consider reconciliation showed a lack of maturity, something broke inside me. I stood up looking at these people, who were supposed to love and protect me, and realized I was completely alone. "This family is toxic," I said quietly, "and I want no part of it anymore." I walked out of my parents' house that day with the crushing realization that I had lost not only my fiancée and brother, but my entire support system in one fell swoop. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. I moved into a sparse one-bedroom apartment, unable to face returning to the home I had shared with Stephanie. I called in sick to work repeatedly, spending days in bed staring at the ceiling. Nights were consumed by excessive drinking that did nothing to numb the pain but provided temporary escape from my thoughts. My phone continued to buzz with messages from family members oscillating between guilt-tripping and angry accusations about my stubbornness. Each message only pushed me further into isolation. I stopped answering calls altogether, silencing notifications and disconnecting from social media to avoid seeing updates about Stephanie and Jack's life together. The rock bottom came one Tuesday morning when I found myself unable to get out of bed for the third consecutive day. Unwashed dishes filled my sink takeout containers, littered my coffee table, and I had worn the same clothes for days. In that moment of clarity, I realized I was allowing their betrayal to destroy me completely. It was a chance encounter that began my slow climb out of despair. While forcing myself to grocery shop one evening, I ran into Thomas, an old college roommate I had not seen in years. He immediately noticed something was wrong and insisted we grab coffee. Before I knew it, I was pouring out the whole sordid story to someone who had no stake in the family drama. "Stay with me," Thomas offered without hesitation after hearing everything. "I have a spare room and it sounds like you need a fresh environment." No pressure, just a place to regroup. His kindness, with no ulterior motives, was the first genuine support I had received since the betrayal. I accepted moving into his spare room the next day. The change of scenery provided the distance I needed to begin thinking clearly again. It was through Thomas that I learned Stephanie and Jack had moved in together with my family's blessing. They were preparing for the baby's arrival while being embraced by my parents, who seemed to have decided that their relationship was somehow acceptable now that it was out in the open. The final confrontation came 2 months later. My mother had been leaving increasingly desperate voicemails, insisting that I join a family dinner to begin the healing process. Against my better judgment and Thomas's advice, I agreed to one final dinner, perhaps seeking closure more than reconciliation. I arrived at my parents' house to find everyone already seated at the dining table. Stephanie was there, her pregnancy now visibly showing. Jack sat beside her, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. My parents and sister smiled nervously as I entered the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. The dinner began awkwardly with forced small talk about weather and current events. No one dared address the elephant in the room until my father raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said solemnly. "And new beginnings." Something inside me snapped. The controlled facade I had maintained crumbled as years of being the responsible, accommodating son collided with the fresh wound of their betrayal. "New beginnings," I repeated, setting down my untouched glass. "Is that what we are calling this situation? My brother sleeps with my fiancée, gets her pregnant, and now we are toasting to new beginnings, as if this is a normal family dinner." "Miller, please," my mother began, her voice pleading. "We are trying to move forward." "Moving forward would require acknowledging what happened," I countered. "None of you have truly acknowledged how deeply I have been hurt. Instead, you have embraced the very people who betrayed me and expected me to fall in line." My father's expression hardened. "That is enough, Miller. We understand you are hurt, but this attitude is not helping anyone. Sometimes life deals us difficult cards and we must adapt. Adapt. I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call this? Let me tell you what this actually is. This is manipulation. This is gaslighting. This is choosing the path of least resistance rather than standing up for what is right. I turned to Jack and Stephanie, who had remained silent. And you two. You do not even have the decency to look ashamed. You destroyed my future, my trust, and my relationship with my family. Yet you sit here playing house as if you have done nothing wrong. The room fell silent. Then my sister spoke up, her voice cold. You are being selfish, Miller. There is a baby involved now. Your niece or nephew. Are you really going to abandon your family because of your pride? That was the moment of perfect clarity. These people were not my support system, they were my prison. They had shown me repeatedly that my feelings, my dignity, and my psychological well-being were secondary to maintaining a facade of family harmony. My decision is made, I said calmly, standing up from the table. I quit my position at the firm yesterday and sold my stake in the family business. I am moving across the country next week. The announcement was met with shocked silence, followed by an eruption of protests and accusations. You cannot just leave, my mother cried. What about us? What about your responsibilities? My responsibility is to myself. Now, I replied firmly. For too long I have put this family's needs before my own, and look where that got me. My father stood up, his face red with anger. If you walk out that door, Miller, do not expect to be welcomed back with open arms. Family stands together, no matter what. I looked at him sadly. That is where you are wrong, Dad. Real family does not betray each other. Real family does not ask someone to sacrifice their self-respect. What you are describing is not family. It is a cult of obligation. As I turned to leave, Jack finally spoke. Miller, you are being dramatic. We never meant to hurt you. Sometimes things just happen, and you need to accept that. I stopped at the doorway and looked back at all of them one last time. No, Jack. Spilling coffee happens. Getting caught in the rain happens. Sleeping with your brother's fiancée is a choice you made repeatedly. And now I am making my choice. I walked out that night, ignoring their calls as they followed me to my car. The attempts at emotional blackmail continued for days, with messages ranging from angry accusations to tearful pleas. I responded by changing my phone number, putting my few remaining possessions in storage, and booking a one-way ticket to Seattle, where a former colleague had connected me with a prestigious architecture firm looking for new talent. Seattle's persistent rain matched my mood during those first few weeks, but there was something cleansing about starting over in a city where no one knew my story. I found a small but modern apartment with a view of Elliott Bay, the constant movement of ferry boats providing a soothing backdrop to my new beginning. The architecture firm welcomed me warmly. My portfolio spoke for itself, and I threw myself into work with renewed focus. Long hours at the office meant less time alone with painful memories, and gradually I began to find my footing in this new life. The loneliness was intense at first. Evenings and weekends stretched endlessly with no familiar faces or places to provide comfort. I forced myself to explore the city, discovering small coffee shops, bookstores, and hiking trails that slowly began to feel like mine. I joined a local gym and a weekend basketball league, building a routine that gave structure to my days. Genuine friendships developed gradually. There was Dave, a fellow architect at the firm, who invited me to his weekly poker nights. Maria, a barista at my local coffee shop, who recommended books that matched my interests perfectly. Kyle, a teammate from basketball, who introduced me to his wider circle of friends. These connections were built on shared interests and mutual respect, without the complicated history and obligations of family relationships. 6 months into my new life, I met Sarah. She was a landscape architect whose firm frequently collaborated with mine on large-scale projects. We were paired together on a sustainable urban park development, spending long hours discussing how our designs could complement each other. Her creativity and passion for her work reminded me of what I loved about architecture before it became tangled with family expectations. Sarah and I became friends first, grabbing lunch together during project meetings or occasionally meeting for coffee to discuss ideas. There was no pressure or expectation, just a natural connection that grew organically. When she eventually asked if I wanted to grab dinner sometime outside of work, I found myself saying yes without hesitation. Throughout this period, the occasional message from my family would still find its way to me. My mother somehow obtained my email address and sent long emotional appeals for reconciliation. My sister found my LinkedIn profile and sent connection requests with attached notes about how the family was not complete without me. I read them all but responded to none, unwilling to reopen wounds that were finally beginning to heal. 9 months after leaving Boston, I attended a regional architecture conference where I unexpectedly ran into my cousin Patrick. Unlike the rest of the family, Patrick had always marched to his own beat, maintaining enough distance to avoid getting caught in family drama. We cautiously grabbed coffee, both of us navigating the awkwardness of our family connection. "They talk about you, you know," Patrick said, stirring his latte. "The family gatherings are not the same without you there to play peacekeeper." I shrugged. "Not my job anymore." Patrick nodded thoughtfully. "For what it is worth, I think you did the right thing. And you might be interested to know that Stephanie and Jack are not exactly living the dream. They fight constantly. The baby was born 3 months ago, a boy. They named him Robert after your dad, which seemed like a calculated move to cement their place in the family." The information washed over me, and I was surprised to feel nothing. No satisfaction at their troubles, no lingering pain at the mention of their new life together. Just a peaceful detachment that confirmed I was healing. My new circle of friends became the family I chose rather than the one I was born into. We celebrated holidays together, supported each other through challenges, and respected each other's boundaries. When Sarah's mother was diagnosed with cancer, I was there to support her through the treatments and recovery. When Dave went through a difficult breakup, our friend group rallied around him with distractions and genuine care. The 1-year anniversary of my move to Seattle arrived with less fanfare than I expected. I had thought the date might trigger painful memories, but instead I found myself reflecting on how much stronger I had become. The betrayal that once defined my every waking moment had been reduced to an unpleasant chapter in my past, not the defining story of my life. That evening, Sarah and I walked along the waterfront, the setting sun, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. She knew pieces of my story, but had never pushed for details I was not ready to share. "You seem different today," she observed, her hand comfortably entwined with mine. "More at peace." I nodded, watching a ferry disappear toward the islands. I realized something today. For the first time since everything happened, I went a whole day without thinking about them. Not once. She squeezed my hand. "That is a good thing, right?" "It is," I confirmed. "It means I have finally moved on. Not by forgiving and forgetting like they wanted me to, but by building something new that is entirely my own." The most important lesson I learned through this painful journey was that sometimes walking away is not an act of cowardice, but the bravest choice you can make. Toxic relationships do not become less toxic simply because they are wrapped in the package of family. Self-respect is not selfishness. Boundaries are not betrayals. I also learned that starting over, while terrifying, offers freedom that cannot be found in compromise. The family you choose can provide more genuine support than the one you were born into. And healing does not require reconciliation with those who hurt you. Sometimes it requires distance from them. Today my life is full in ways I never imagined possible in those dark days after the betrayal. I advanced quickly at the firm, and now lead my own team of designers. Sarah and I moved in together 6 months ago, our relationship built on a foundation of honesty and respect that I now recognize was missing from what I had with Stephanie. I sometimes wonder if I will ever reconnect with my family of origin. Perhaps someday, if they can acknowledge the harm they caused and respect the boundaries I have established. But that reconciliation, if it happens, will be on my terms and timeline, not theirs. Have you ever had to walk away from toxic relationships, even when those relationships were with family members? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about choosing yourself when others will not. Remember that your worth is not determined by how much mistreatment you can endure, but by your courage to demand better. Thank you for listening, and take care of yourselves out there.